Dr. Harshvardhan, the Union Health Minister of India, Dr. Ashwath Narayana, the Deputy Chief Minister of Karnataka, Dr. Devi Shetty, Dr. Manjunath, well-known physicians in the state of Karnataka who have made our state proud, various innovative initiatives of theirs, Sri Krishna Bhattji, Dr. Tejaswani Anand Kumar, all Dr. Srinath ji and all friends who joined from different parts of the world. Every speaker generally is always worried about what to speak, especially when such august audience comes together. And the last 1 hour itself has been a lesson in leadership. From Dr. Harshvardhan's narrative about how we face the pandemic, Dr. Devi Shetty so beautifully bringing out policy leadership in the context of what India is doing today, Dr. Manjunath and Dr. Ashwath Narayana. Now the real panic for me is I have to confess that the topic indicated to me was leadership and the way India handled the leadership to this pandemic. So I'm going to stick to the original topic and not get into the environmental and financial interventions that the nation has done. So let me stick to leadership, which is an area of my research study and domain expertise. COVID has been spoken about in several different ways the last 1 hour. We have all seen what it can do. We have all seen what are the consequences that we can all see is all known to all of us, whether it is at the individual disease level or it is at a larger level. But most importantly, I don't think leadership can be restricted to the series of actions that we do to what we see. I think the greatness of our country and its responses has to be measured from what is not seen and what is done. I think that is very significant because COVID has posed such a challenge that there has been no textbook in history which has prepared mankind, either at the leadership level or at a technical level, to learn how to handle this kind of a challenge. It has affected possibly every single human being in the world in some way or the other. Whether it infects you or not, it has affected you in some way or the other. It affected countries, organizations, economies. For the first time, collectively, every one of us in this world feels how fragile we are, not just health-wise, but in every measure. It has challenged our understanding of human development. It has laid focus on our lifestyles and the reasons why zoonotic illnesses are suddenly becoming more and more the last decade. More importantly, it has demonstrated to us how vulnerable we are. It has demonstrated also how interconnected the world is. Now we talk of Wuhan in November, and in India it's there in January. Maybe it was earlier, but the official diagnosed case was in January. So it's a small world, which means the problems of the world today are much more significant than what it could have been a century earlier. Amidst all this, the narratives that we don't speak about, the narratives that we see, are very powerful expressions, whether it is an ASHA worker in a small little village struggling to make sure that she can communicate the message of hand washing to a community which finds expenditure on soap impossible to make, or whether it is a district magistrate suddenly in the limelight because he has to manage a medical situation where he's not possibly trained for it, to the Honorable Prime Minister and the extraordinary leadership that he demonstrated with his cabinet colleagues in our country. Whether it is a WHO and sometimes a confused leadership that they demonstrated at times, or to our own ICMR, which showed such leadership in a very measured way, we have all seen different examples of leadership. Nationally, countries like New Zealand, India are models, as much as there are other countries which are models for what leadership should not be in a crisis. And we can't ignore that. As a student of leadership, all these are lessons for all of us, and we need to really be learning from them to prepare ourselves, to future-proof ourselves against such eventualities in the future. But before I get into leadership, I would like to possibly give understanding of what leadership means to all of us. We need to all be on the same page of how we define leadership itself. Because the word leader is thrown around so casually. Possibly from Dawood Ibrahim to Veerappan, we portray them as leaders. To political positions are portrayed as leadership positions. So we need to really be clear, what exactly do we mean when we use the word leader or leadership? Intuitively, leaders are seen as people in positions of power. significantly holding on to positions like executive director or CEO or the chief minister or the prime minister, which is not wrong by itself, but that's an intuitive understanding. It is a person who's visible, a person who communicates his passionate vision, and possibly people who follow him. And so we have this traditional intuitive understanding of a leader with several followers. And I think it's important for us to make this distinction because I do believe if you track the trajectory of Anant Kumar and his journey from being a student leader to what he achieved in his life, you will see that more than being a leader, what he demonstrated to all of us is a powerful expression of leadership. And there's a huge distinct difference in the way leadership gets expressed. Being a leader is a statement, expressing leadership is a lifestyle. And there's a huge difference between the two. So to me, how would I look at leadership? Because COVID crisis has shown the world that there is no single person in the world who has a repository of skills with which you could have managed the crisis. It is just impossible for any one human being to have had all the skill sets that this particular challenge posed us. The challenge didn't have a simple technical SOP which anybody could have deployed and understood this is how you can manage an epidemic in the past. Every single public health leader was as confused as the next. Well, we had a lot of pretentious leadership demonstrated, but real leadership was in understanding that we still don't know enough. And several such examples are there in our country today. First time we were threatened by an adaptive problem, which has got such uncertainty built around it, with such little data to manage, with such little understanding of the problem itself, that we had to literally shoot in the dark. I say this because you can understand the magnitude of the leadership expressed in our country only when you understand the magnitude of the problem itself. It is not just a health crisis. It was not just a demand on the public health system and how well the deputy commissioners or the district health ministers or the district health officer or the state health ministers managed the problem. It is far more complex and interconnected than that. So how would I look at leadership? And from there, I would take on how India handled this crisis itself. To me, leadership is a different way of, it might sound counterintuitive. Well, I do believe people express leadership. I would not like to belittle them by calling them as leaders. I look at people. Leadership to me is an activity. It's about doing something. It's not about being someone. It's about doing something. And what is it that we can do? Leadership to me is simply the activity of mobilizing a group and the resources that they have. Because we don't have the resources as one single person. Our ability to mobilize a group and the resources of communities of people around us to do something societally constructive amidst enormous uncertainty. That is a true expression of leadership. That's possibly the highest expression of leadership. In a sense, it is what the Bhagavad Gita describes so beautifully. Now, doing it with the full intention of doing the best for society, but with no understanding of what is in store for us, either as a consequence of what we do or what's going to emerge from that. COVID crisis is exactly that opportunity for us where we could sift out and prove who are the real leaders, who are the counterfeit leaders. So how did India really manage this crisis? What kind of a situation? So to me, it was a simplistic, if I were to deconstruct this abstraction that I mentioned right now as an expression of leadership, it's simply an equation, a very simple equation. It's an equation of knowing yourself, knowing your abilities as much as your inabilities. It is knowing people around you, the others around us, and the set of actions that bind us as individuals, those around us, at whatever level, whether it's an Asha or whether it is the Honorable Prime Minister of the country. Each of us have to begin by knowing ourselves, our capacities, our competences, our limitations, our strengths, getting to assess those around us, and then understanding what is it that we can do as a collective, the set of actions that can bind us to solve the problem that is ahead of us. And be absolutely rested and grounded with the belief that you may not actually solve the problem too. That's exactly what we are going through. It's also about inspiring people with a common purpose. It's about expressing humility. It's about coming to terms with your own incompetence, not just thriving on your competence, but accepting what you don't know and coming to terms with your incompetence. More importantly, it is having the ability to construct reality as close to reality as possible. And please understand, when the definitions of reality is complex and changing by the day, when the virus doesn't present one particular predictive pattern from which we can learn and project realities, every day is a new reality. And constantly inspiring people to still perform in this reality is what I think is real leadership all about. And if keeping this in mind, how did India fare? What has India done? So I would like to look at leadership in three major boxes. The first leadership that India demonstrably showed what I would call crisis leadership. How did we deal with the crisis at every level? And when I say crisis, crisis as interpreted, responded to, and handled by people at several levels. There's so many layers to it. It could be from the national level to the small little Asha worker that I spoke about. And every single person was important, as much as me and you, where we had to exhibit leadership at a citizen's level, and some of us did and some of us have not. And we need to really look at it too. The way we managed the crisis is a specific reference of COVID and what a solution frameworks were. The next level of leadership, I would say, which is important to any country, is what I call performance leadership. Now, everybody can focus on the crisis, but what about running the rest of the country? We can't forget that the country is not just fighting COVID. There's so many other things to be done. Now, I always give this example. So, Mysorean, this is my favorite example. We all celebrate Nada Habba, Dasara. And it's very strange. When Dasara actually comes into Karnataka, to Mysore, everything other than Dasara comes to a halt. Life as we know it is all revolving around Dasara. Or look at our national elections. During elections, try going to a government office and try to get something done. The standard response from the clerk or the officer in charge would be election mugud mail bani. So we sort of put aside every other problem to just manage that one single issue. And so I would like to analyze India and its responses as performance leadership. What happened to India's performance as a nation in every sector, whether it is protecting our borders to passing policies, and I'm glad Dr. Devi Shetty brought it out. We didn't lose sight of that. So we have done a lot as performance people also. And I would like to give examples and elaborate a little later. And the third more important leadership, which is real leadership for a nation, is strategic leadership that the real national leader can provide. It is transformational leadership at the strategic level, which India demonstrates to the world in clear terms, in unmistakable terms. I think the lesson that we can, as a nation, teach the rest of the world is how we have successfully managed crisis leadership, performance leadership, and strategic transformational leadership, sometimes all in the same person. And let's look at the crisis and how we handle the crisis. If you go back to my definition and look at mobilizing the community or mobilizing the resources of people all around us, what people might have laughed off or dismissed off with lighting candles or banging plates, I see it as a very powerful symbolic expression of national leadership. In one stroke, the whole country was mobilized to look at a serious problem which otherwise they would not have noticed. If that act had not been communicated to people through a symbolic gesture, people unfortunately focus on the symbolism without looking and reflecting on the leadership message behind the symbolism. I think the first step in the crisis leadership was communicate to people there is a problem, but don't worry. If we are together, we may be able to solve it. Communicating that message of poise, communicating that message of confidence, communicating that message of clarity of thought that we are all there together. And repeatedly, the Honorable Prime Minister's words was not, I will solve the problem for you. He said, we, the 130 crore people of this country, together can possibly find a solution. And to reminding people of this togetherness, to me, was a first gesture of crisis leadership. That crisis is there, it is real, but let's not get overwhelmed by it. Providing that strong holding environment where people don't lose their minds and start wondering what's going to happen to us next was an extraordinary gesture. Providing that sustained presence was something important for the nation, and we needed to get it. But let's look at it. It didn't stop there. What I really would like to take forward is I'm not going to focus on how wonderfully we manage the actual health part of the leadership, which is also part of the crisis leadership. I'll come to that in a moment. But more importantly, the messaging that went as a nation was life matters. Life really matters to this country. And in a country like India, sending out that message that every Indian is important and life matters. So, it's a very powerful message. The clarity of vision with which it was communicated. Life first, economy next. It was not that economy is subservient or not important. People should not misunderstand that life took precedence. Life obviously takes precedence. Without people, where is the economy? But the entire nation galvanized itself to saying, we'll have to protect life. I think that single message is enough storyline for the whole country's health systems. And I think it's a matter of pride that having, the last 30, 35 years, have studied India's public health systems, I think we must all really stand up to what our public health system has delivered to this country. Well, we never celebrate successes. We have to all acknowledge the fact that but for India's public health systems, all the successes that the Union Health Minister quoted and the Deputy Chief Minister spoke about briefly would not have actually seen the real kind of work that we are seeing today. We responded. And the beauty of that crisis leadership was the understanding that not one department can do it. We had to converge. The joke in the government 15, 20 years ago was they had schemes to get convergence. In fact, I still remember a UN initiated program, which I was also party to many years, many decades ago, where they actually funded governments to look at convergence of services. I'm sure if UN had realized that COVID could demonstrate it without any expenditure, they would have learned a lesson or two. Today, true convergence of services has emerged in the public delivery systems. Well, gaps. I'm not saying it's perfect, but at least we have demonstrated our public health systems can be responsive. Crisis leadership sometimes, when you're working with inadequate data, when you're working with inadequate projections, because most policy projections, we work with historical data. And when you're facing a crisis for the first time, there is no historical data to fall back on. So when states and national government made policies, obviously there were so many uh, unintended consequences. And I believe the possibly the greatest challenge that this COVID crisis demonstrated to us was unintended consequence of the way we managed a particular segment of society, which we were not seeing them as contributors to the economy in a significant way. We saw what their outputs were contributing to the economy, but we didn't see those people, the migrants of this country, migrant laborers. Even the word migrant, I think, is a flawed word, because when we look at Indians going abroad, we don't call them migrants, right? We call them expats. We celebrate them. But when you look at people moving from one state to another, I think they need and deserve the same amount of celebration. To me, the governance in crisis leadership was within a week, the way the states responded, every state. Within a week, how NGOs responded, how communities, ordinary people responded to make sure that these people were taken care of. It might have been a week of painful suffering, but within a week or 10 days, the nation responded. And that is part of the crisis leadership that we need to see. I think the public health system, driven by the health minister and his team, and the entire storyline that he spoke about, is itself a case study to be studied, written about, and celebrated. And we have seen how other countries' public health systems have responded. I would not want to mention names. I'm sure uh, people like Dr. Devi Shetty, and earlier some of his talks, he's also mentioned this, how the challenges of ethical challenges surrounding management of ventilators and ICU care in the United States, we never had to face all that in our country. I think that is the greatness of our public health responses. The ability to get several disciplines to work together, get two people to work together. There's a famous saying of Swami Vivekananda. He said, put two Indians together, in 3 minutes, they'll have four fights. And he gives a story of putting crabs in a bucket and how if they're Indian crabs, they'll never come out of the bucket. I think we have possibly proved Swami Vivekananda wrong to quite a bit of extent this time. Several of us, whether it is people from the private sector, why would Dr. Devi Shetty or Dr. Manjunath come together to fight the battle? Now, why would people from different disciplines even talk about COVID as a challenge for the whole community? I think for the first time, all sectors, leaving aside the sectoral definitions, sectoral mandates, or disciplinary expertise, have realized that in the interest of humanity, we have to come together. World communities have joined hands. Brazil's HCQS supply came from India. And that's the kind of enormous storylines that we have around the world. So crisis leadership was not just limited to our nation, our cities, our citizens. Scientific leadership that India showed, whether it is in vaccine production or whether it is in drug production. We were a leader in drugs before we surrendered it to China, and now we are regaining all those opportunities. So working with very little data and experience, continuing to inspire citizens, being responsive, and managing the emotions of 1.3 billion people is not easy, especially when their economies are troubled. Now I'll move into the next part, the performance leadership part, and look at how we managed it. It is going ahead with your regular responsibilities. The Prime Minister cannot go on a holiday saying that my job is only COVID, whether it is a border crisis with China or the economic challenges, following through on the fact that we will come back to the economy, first we'll take care of life, and actually coming back with a huge opportunity, and that is the economic prescription that came out. And I'll speak a little bit here on the extraordinary opportunity that came. You know, the entire crisis has also exposed sometimes what I call our weak financial systems. Whether we like it or not, India is a country which is rushing towards progress. India's progress cannot just be celebrated by what World Bank publishes as ease of doing business. And some of you who are in the policy space would realize that yesterday the World Bank has apologized and has ordered an internal inquiry at how shabbily the business ease of doing business reports are being published and how the data itself is suspicious. So under those circumstances, merely saying that our ease of doing business is becoming better and therefore our environment is becoming better may be inadequate. So I believe there are a lot of other local contexts which are demonstrating that how we are becoming better. India is on the threshold of reaching the potential of a $5 trillion economy soon. But beyond just the production of GDP, our ability to manage the GDP, our contractual loss or land loss. So if you look at the definition of Atmanirbhar, I think it's a combination of performance and strategic leadership. Looking at everything that is pulling back India, looking at all those challenges that people have had till now to take India to the next level. For a long time, India had its foot on the brake. First 30, 35 years of our economic history, our foot was clearly on the brake. The private sector had they were not even in the car. And the public sector, whether it is making bread or whether it is running an airport, simply managed and ran everything. Later on, post 90s, we thought we had a foot on an accelerator, but the government forgot that it needed to take its foot off the brake also. So will we continue to claim that we are deregulated? We were claiming it, but we forgot that we are still regulated. And the last 7, 8 years, the number of a small significant event, many of you may not even be watching this, close to 1,700 archaic laws, a legacy of the colonial India that we inherited, have been absolutely removed by the parliament. It is kudos to the Indian parliament, this current parliament, which had the courage to say that these are absolutely meaningless laws. So see it in the context of that, where the build-up towards self-reliance was continuously happening, but the current crisis did not slow it down. Two major announcements I would look at is one is the Atmanirbhar in its entirety. To me, Atmanirbhar is not economic self-reliance. Unfortunately, the media commentators, policy people just limit it. I think it's a very limited expression of a great leadership gesture from the national government. Atmanirbhar is something beyond all that. Atmanirbhar makes you and me feel proud to be an Indian. The emotional satisfaction one derives by just saying I'm an Indian can never be counted because it's a subjective assessment. And getting a nation to feel that way is remarkable leadership. And we need to celebrate that. It is something where, whether it's a cultural self-reliance, whether it is social self-reliance, whether it is political self-reliance, whether it is civic self-reliance, we need to see it in its comprehensive understanding and not reduce it to mere economic self-reliance, which is also true. Our ability to produce ventilators to PPEs is some reason to celebrate. But I look at two changes, both from a strategic viewpoint as well as from a performance viewpoint. When we had the crisis leadership meant that you cannot export PPE. Crisis leadership meant that you cannot export ventilators at this point of time or any medical equipment which needed to save lives in India. Once we established that India is completely self-sufficient, you needed to demonstrate that leadership. Immediately, the national government opened up so that our businessmen, our MSMEs don't have to worry about the stocks that they piled up. Today, India is one of the largest suppliers of PPE around the world. That's some reason to be celebrated. Once you occupy that space, once you taste global recognition of your products, what greater Atmanirbhar can you expect to have than that? And we have done, we have actually been on it after taking care of the inside set of requirements, we are able to export and take it out to the world itself. Isn't that a powerful expression of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? True cultural Atmanirbhar in that. So we have gone beyond ensuring economic survival. We have gone beyond just protecting the borders. We are investing into the future in terms of vaccine and science and technology. But we have not forgotten certain other programs don't get noticed. Unfortunately, um, our media colleague Natu was talking about how certain things don't get noticed. Only high decibel levels get noticed. But certain innovations that have been talked about, certain digital challenges that Niti Aayog has launched, certain abilities for working in data sciences and machine learning that government has understood is critical to build future ready India. And the opportunities that the young people are being sort of thrown at, it's something to be celebrated. I think we need to look at it because we got so obsessed with COVID. We are forgetting the other parallel things that are happening in the ecosystem, which will actually take care of India if the next COVID hits us. So we are today talking about talent across sectors, across the spectrum, looking at opportunities, looking at a new wave of nationalism, a new definition of nationalism. So we are suddenly understanding that nationalism is not busting crackers when India wins the match against Pakistan. That may be a very narrow definition of our own understanding of nationalism. Nationalism today is taking pride in the way we are able to manage the country, we're able to respond to governance demands, we're looking at this newfound energy, newfound global recognitions, and the policy leadership which is silently happening in parliament. Many of you may not even be aware. We all talk and write when a illiterate person gets elected to parliament. What we don't talk and write is possibly the current parliament has got the highest number of PhDs ever in India's independent history. So we are suddenly faced with an enormous opportunity of very serious, sincere people across the political spectrum who also believe that India has got the potential and power to change. So in a sense, even our parliamentarians are getting the Atmanirbhar feeling now, which itself is a great sign that India is in the progress to what we are all dreaming about. Look at the global recognition of being the executive chair of WHO. Right now, it's a hot seat. We all know what WHO is going through. We all know what global relationships and international politics are subjecting multinational institutions to. Some of we cannot dismiss it off as all being untrue in politics. There's a lot of truth in it. The way global institutions are managed, the way global North dominations have existed in the policy narratives of the world, the way the global South is looked down upon, the way we are seen as recipients of progress of the Western nations and not creators of progress for the world, that has to change. And India has occupied the first step. Many of you might have seen that WhatsApp message that was circulating around. It might look a joke, but I think that is the expression of Atmanirbhar and leadership this country has shown. The WhatsApp message was simple. President Trump and President of China were talking and looking at what their countries have achieved. And they come to Modi to sort it out and say, Prime Minister Modi, please tell us who's achieved it more. Prime Minister Modi says, well, I don't have time to answer all this, but please look at all the great globally celebrated businessmen, whether it is from Google or Microsoft. Look at possibly your vice president could be an Indian tomorrow, or the prime minister earlier of Ireland, of all the different countries, and you will find your answer. We Indians are global today. And I think what more, it may look like a joke, but in a sense, whether it is commerce and industry, whether it is the social sector space, or whether it is the political space, we have a reason to celebrate. And I think COVID, the greatest leadership expression I found in my analysis is countries which did not talk of COVID as a crisis. Initially, we had to talk of it as a crisis. But look at the changing narrative of India today. The narrative today is COVID is an opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity to reinforce that we need to look at a new future-proof or future-ready India. We need to future-proof India against all the challenges that we can get. And that can happen only when you drive our young people to occupy those slots. We have real challenges today. Leadership is not easy. Surveys are showing that close to 40 to anywhere between, depending on which survey you're reading or whose paper you're subscribing to, between 40 to 60% of India are suffering from huge mental health challenges. COVID has exposed our ability to manage mental health. We need demonstrable leadership now to look at universal health care, to look at geriatric populations, to look at vulnerable populations. And so these are opportunities that the health ministry is already talking about. Several of you may not be aware, but the Prime Minister's office personally monitors India's community-based health centers, wellness centers, community wellness centers that are being started across the country, which will be by 2022 December. Possibly the whole country will be full of this, managed by community health officers. Our National Medical Commission, the law which has come in, has already conceived a mid-level healthcare worker. Now, if all these things are policy, the moment we transition it into action, the universal healthcare will not be a slogan. We're already ensuring more than half of India, and the state is providing resources. So we are, in a sense, have started the journey, and we are already going in that direction. But finally, the only lamenting truth is, are we Indians ready for all this? We as Indians several times look to the magic wand at the top, which will be waved and all our problems will be solved. Let us understand, COVID has demonstrated no one leader can solve the country's problems. No one leader can solve the world's problems. The only way we can solve it is bring out the leader in each one of you. It's a great opportunity. COVID has finally presented as an opportunity to be a visible leader in our own spaces. All we need is 130 crore Indians to understand that. Simple things. Sometimes when I walk in the streets of Mysore, It is so saddening that people think that COVID is gone already. They forget physical distancing. Dr. Manjunath was sharing, but it's a sad fact that the government may talk about it, doctors may talk about it, public health experts may talk about it, but our citizens expressing leadership, are the youth of this country expressing leadership in understanding that they have a role to play. True Atmanirbharate for citizenship is something we need to demonstrate. So leadership is not at the top of the pyramid. Leadership is in every one of us at the bottom too. And when we understand that today we have an opportunity to stop criticizing the system, but to be an inseparable part of the solution. When we understand that it is we who are going to chart the future of this country, all we need was a facilitatory ecosystem. Today, we have been provided an extraordinary situation where that facilitatory ecosystem has been created by national leadership and state level leadership. Several states, you should see some of the progressive changes that Uttar Pradesh has brought in. And then now 78 states, including Karnataka, followed suit. There's such wonderful policy changes, which for a policy analyst like me is music to my ears. Expressions of policy leadership is happening at several levels. There are also failures. Several districts are not understanding how to manage the crisis. Well, lessons to learn. These are lessons to learn how to strengthen a bureaucracy so they can respond better. These are lessons to learn how do you build capacities in the entire system. So I would look at it as an opportunity for lessons to be learned, opportunity for tightening out those bolts and nuts which have got loosened by the last 20 years of complacence. So these are opportunities for us to understand that we can all be part of the solution. And when we show the world that kind of leadership, that is inherently embedded in every Indian, when we drive it to the civilizational strength that only countries like India can bring to the table, truly then will India become the Jagat Guru that this world is desperately seeking and needs. When we do that, can move into the state of no that great that we can not just talk about making this world a better place. We'll actually end up making this world a better place, and that change will begin from India. So my conclusion remarks are: COVID has given us some deep questions, and I would like to leave you with an economic question in every one of your minds. COVID has taught us that this blind pursuit of GDP and economic growth possibly is a questionable solution to bringing about social change. What COVID has taught us is investing on humans and social capital, investing on the people and societal frameworks, the strength that India has had for thousands of years, is possibly the only way this world needs to go. It is time for us to now take away people from an economy which is mindlessly pursuing consumerism, which is mindlessly looking at profit maximization, and start looking at benefit optimization. Every single stakeholder in society is creating value for all of us. Every single human being is creating value. And if we can value this value and move society towards a fourth sector economy, towards a for benefit economy, in that would lie solutions for future crisis. And I'm glad India is also making a lot of moves towards this end. Some of you may not be aware that India is talking about establishing a social stock exchange. And if these things become reality and get set up in ways in which become global models, I think we'll not only be talking, but we'll also be walking the talk. And in a few years from now, every Indian will have a lot to rejoice and cherish. But then it is left to every Indian to do that. So let's all join hands. And this Pratishtana's effort in focusing on public policy and leadership, two very strong areas of Sri Anand Kumar ji, and his vision in looking at policy and the leadership to ensure that the policy gets implemented are lessons for all of us. And I'm sure Dr. Tejaswini, under leadership of such eminent people like Krishna Bhatt and others, would definitely look at creating a new cadre, a new generation of young people who are going to be the change makers. What India needs is to invest on these people with a vision of leadership, with a vision of policy prescription that this country can possibly give to the rest of the world itself. And that possibly is the dream that people like Vivekananda had, to see Mother India on that throne. To take her there, we are ready, but the journey has to be from each one of us. So I thank everybody for your patient listening. I thank Dr. Tejaswini for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. It's indeed a privilege to be the speaker on the first ever Nation First digital series. And I'm very confident that this idea of nation first is a very powerful slogan. Possibly it's a very anglicized version of Atmanirbhar itself. Because if you put nation first at every level, that is all you need for this country. And that is possibly the greatest testimony to a political legend like Anand Kumar. Thank you all so much.